Welcome back to Vendetta Sports Media's NBA preview series. My name's Jarrod Prosser. I'm here today with Jerry Walker. And Jerry, we are here to talk about a team that, they went through a pretty seismic change in the offseason, the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Oh, yeah. Seismic change doesn't really cover it that much. There are some huge key pieces going different places, a lot of secondary scoring help, but they did bring in one big player in Rudy Gobert.
Big in every sense of the word. Every sense of the word. So before we get on to Gobert, though, because there is, the ins and outs of Minnesota, there's so much to cover. Just talk to us a little bit about Minnesota's 2022 campaign.
I mean, they had a surprisingly good season compared to what they had the past few years. Finished 46-36, seventh in the West. They were able to get into the play-in rounds and ended up beating the LA Clippers in that first play-in game, which I don't think a lot of people expected. Now, the Clippers had been banged up, but still impressive for Minnesota to make it back into the playoffs. And I mean, when they made it, they ran into Memphis, who was just such a juggernaut all season and really looks like one of the best teams in the West last year, and went out in the first round. Well, it was 4-2, and kind of expected a little bit more in that series from them, but
it was a weird series. I mean, Minnesota got themselves into some really, really good positions. So some big leads in, I think, 3 of the games from memory, and they just they found new and inventive ways to shoot themselves in the foot at every turn. It was almost one of those series that you look at, like, let's say Minnesota win the 2025 championship, for example. We'd look back at that 2022 first round loss and you say, that's when the boys became men, or something like, some sort of regular sports trope like that, where, they overcame adversity, like the 88 Bulls or something like that.
And I mean, even game one, Minnesota won 130-117 in Memphis. So it wasn't exactly close. And Anthony Edwards dropped 36. And he you thought they were going to make it at least a 7-game series, but it just wasn't to be. Like you said, shot themselves in the foot, lost a couple close ones that they really shouldn't have, that they had big leads late. Being outscored 37-12 in the fourth quarter of the first game in Minnesota. That was rough for them.
That was what broke them, I think. That was the maybe not broke Minnesota, but that was the one where Memphis, it seemed to click for Memphis, where they thought, if we can turn this on, we are better than this team. Like, this team's talented, but they're not us. Yeah. If we do what we can do, we'll take them. That seemed to be the moment that Memphis got themselves out of whatever funk they were in. And from there, it was an entertaining series, but it felt kind of inevitable from that point.
Yeah, you kind of always knew Memphis was going to get it done with them. And it's going to be interesting to see where Minnesota, if they're going to be able to make that next step this season.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's where we'll get to with the end of this preview, I'm sure. But before we get to, what will happen this season, let's talk about their ins and outs. We mentioned the big Frenchman Gobert right off the top, but I mean, deep breath here, Jerry, but mention all of their ins and outs. Let's work through them.
So, yeah, I mean, obviously the big trade this offseason was them acquiring Rudy Gobert. But what they gave up for Rudy Gobert is extreme, in my opinion. They gave up Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, another guard in Leandro Bolmaro, and then Jared Vanderbilt, as far as players go. Then the 2023 first-round pick, 2025, 2027, and a 2029 first round, and then a 26 first-round pick swap. So that's a lot going for just one player in return.
That's a hell of a lot.
At a position that they already have Karl Anthony Towns, who is one of the best big men in the league, arguably.
At one end of the floor, absolutely. He might be the best offensive center in basketball, Towns, but you've also now got the guy who is the best defensive center in basketball. If you could do some sort of weird-ass Frankenstein amalgamation of the two, you're essentially looking at Wilt Chamberlain with a jump shot, which is damn frightening. Unfortunately, gene splicing and all that isn't legal in the NBA yet, so Chris Finch is going to have to figure out a way to play the two of them. There wasn't really. I mean, they've picked up a few other players around the periphery as you would expect when you get rid of half your team for Gobert. But were there any other players that they brought in that you looked at that think they could make an impact?
I mean, the only two that really kind of stood out to me were Austin Rivers, who had a decent role in Denver, didn't get a ton of playing time, but tried to take advantage of it. And then Kyle Anderson, just because they got rid of their whole bench. So it's really going to be looking at these two guys to kind of step up and carry that second unit.
Yeah, Anderson, I think, is a big pickup for them. He'll surely play the four when either Gobert or Towns sit. But how a guy who has a bit of a shaky jumper, as much as he's a wonderful cutter, how a guy with a shaky jumper fits with Gobert is going to prove really interesting, I think. Let's move into some of the categories we've got for this preview. Jerry, who do you think is the star man? And really, you could go 3 or 4 ways with this, but who do you think is the star man for the Timberwolves coming into this season?
I would say Karl Anthony Towns is the star guy, but it's kind of that 3-headed monster, or really the 2, depending on D'Angelo Russell's health, if he actually is able to stay healthy and play. But Anthony Edwards was a monster last year. He really took a step forward from his rookie season, and I highly expect him to do that again this year. He averaged 21.3 points, 1.5 steals, which is something this stat that kind of gets overlooked. The steals, it shows his defensive efficiency. And then he only had 3.8 assists per game last year, but I think that's something that he could step up more with, especially with another big man playing down low.
And the thing you have to remember with Edwards is he's still a baby. He's so young. The potential in that man is just outlandish. I still remember, I think it was the day before his draft day when it came out that he said that, I love football. I enjoy playing basketball, but I don't love it. And all of a sudden, every alarm went off in my head. It's like, yeah, he's an irrepressible athlete, but gee, could you be looking at someone who's not going to give everything? And to his credit and to my relief, and I'm sure the relief of many people in Minnesota, he appears to be a very good professional. Like, as much as it might not be his number one sport, he works his ass off. He's improved his game so much. Now, I tend to agree with you, Jerry. I think Cat is still the man in Minnesota this season. But, geez, next season, the season after that Edwards takes over that mantle, it's got to be pretty close.
Yeah, they could be a very dynamic 1-2 punch in that NBA in the Western Conference. And I mean, the Northwest Division alone isn't going to be as strong necessarily because I feel like Utah gave up a lot, but Denver's still there. Portland, they have Dame, so they can always be an interesting team. And then the Thunder, and they're rebuilding at the moment, which who knows what they could suddenly step out of nowhere, but I don't think they will yet.
Without Chet, I highly doubt it. Yeah. It'll be interesting. I mean, Denver will be much improved with Jokic's various Robins to his Batman back on the court. Portland will be improved, not just getting Lillard back, but all of the other players they've got around him. It'll be interesting to see who claims the higher position out of Minnesota and Portland, because neither are really playing for a top 4 seed. Both are playing for the second half of the playoff picture. But there's a very big chance that one of them could get in at the exclusion of the other. It'll be interesting to see which gambles from which front office pay off and which ones don't. Before we move on to the X Factor, I want to ask you how you think, and this has been discussed so often, but I want to ask you, Jerry, how you think Chris Finch will work the Gobert-Towns relationship on the floor. How do you think he's going to make those two dovetail at both ends of the floor?
That's one of the things I had down as my X factor was just how are these two guys going to play together? Because it is an interesting dynamic. Neither of them has really played with another big man, but as you kind of hinted earlier, Cat is one of the best 3-point shooting big guys to ever play the game. And Gobert is one of the premier post threats on the offensive side. He can grab rebounds with ease. And I think that, as far as that goes, that's how Finch will have to play them. His Towns kind of more on the perimeter with Gobert down low. But then defense.
I think on offense, I'm looking forward to seeing how Gobert's vertical spacing impacts Minnesota's offense. Because, very, very quietly, the key to Utah's offense wasn't, this whirring motion of players, and there was lots of passing and three-point shooting, but it was all predicated on the fact that if you went to the shooters, Gobert was going to shoot 8 out of 10 every single night, because all he would do was just catch lobs and dunk it. Yep. So I'm interested to see whether that opens up Russell and Edwards, and particularly Towns. And it might even open up some of these guys who are, you mentioned Austin Rivers, a guy who traditionally isn't a great shooter, but you leave him open, he'll drop it. So I'm interested to see how that impacts those sorts of players. Defensively, man, that's interesting though.
Yeah, defensively, because obviously Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year candidate year in, year out, one of the premier shot blockers. He has to be kind of in the paint, and guarding the 5, I would say. But then that leaves Cat, a guy who hasn't historically been known for having outstanding defense. He's going to have to guard a smaller, quicker guy. The likes of, say, the Nuggets, for example, he is going to have to guard Aaron Gordon, which Gordon could give him some issues with his speed and cutting ability. I just don't think he'll be as good of a perimeter defender for Cat as he would be down low, but Gobert's down there. So I think defensively is going to be where we see more of an issue.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how they hide Cat. Gobert, frankly, is a better perimeter defender than Cat. There's a couple of memes of Harden and Curry 6 or 7 years ago crossing him up, but the fact that they keep getting shown shows how relatively scarce those examples are. So, I'm really interested to see how they do work Cat into the gaps where he's not going to be a really negative influence on the defense. And you're absolutely right. If Chris Finch, who offensively is a genius, defensively, still finding his chops as a coach, but if he can find a way to make this work, then he's got a hell of a team on his hands. But if he doesn't, not only the impact on the court this season and the next season and the one after that, but you mentioned all of those players and picks right off the get-go. If this doesn't work, this could be catastrophic for a franchise that is traditionally a shit show.
Yeah. And they just signed Cat to a 4-year, $224 million extension. So they've invested a lot of money into him. And if him and Gobert can't click, that's not going to be good for them at all.
No, and you can't trade Cat. He's your number one pick. He's got his best mate playing there in Russell. He's also, 26, I think, whereas Gobert's a 30-year-old whose game is reliant on outstanding athleticism. So ultimately, you're mortgaging your future if you decide Gobert over Cat. But if you trade Gobert, you're back to square one without all those draft picks, because you're certainly not going to recap them, or recoup them, I should say. So, you're absolutely right. That's a really good X factor. It's not necessarily a player, but a situation. I like that one.
And then I was going to say I had a kind of another X factor that we kind of hinted on a little bit earlier, but it's just, again, that scoring off the bench with how much they traded away all their bench. And I think the two guys will be Austin Rivers and Kyle Anderson to step up, which it's going to be interesting. They've had Malik Beasley off the bench last season, who kind of was that second scoring guy, but it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of Towns anchoring the second units just to give them an offensive focus. And, playing against a second string big man, he won't be as negative an impact defensively. So I'm expecting to see a little bit of that. I might be wrong, though. But, Jerry, let's cut to the chase here. What's your prediction for Minnesota's record? Where do they end up in the conference in 2023?
I do think from last season, I think they'll make a little bit of a jump forward, considering Utah will be falling back. So I have Minnesota finishing at 48-34 on the season, which I have them as 5th in the West and 2nd in the Northwest Division. Just because I do think Anthony Edwards and D'Lo, and they'll make a step forward because it's very guard heavy in the West. So I think they'll be able to be a good 1-2 tandem. And then I do think that it might be a little rough to start but I do think Gobert and Cat will be able to gel alongside each other.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Chris Finch as a coach. I think he'll figure it out eventually. So we've got a fifth seed, 48 wins, I think you said.
Yep.
Yeah, and that'll. I'll tell you what, that's almost great in Minnesota.
Oh yeah,
that's a huge season for them. So I think we'll wrap this one up. Jerry, we've got 48 wins, fifth in the West, according to our man Jerry Walker. So that will do it for this edition of our NBA previews on Vendetta Sports Media. Keep an eye on the YouTube channel. All these videos will come out there. Of course, subscribe to those channels. Keep an eye on the website. That's Jerry Walker. You can tweet at him at JerryF007. And I'm Jarrod Prosser. That's hey_it's_JP. For all of us at Vendetta Media, we'll catch you for the next NBA preview.